It's 6:36. First order of business is to review and make any changes to the agenda. We do have 3 items to add under new business.
Sorry, I'm just relocating.
Yeah, not a problem.
Okay. New business.
So under new business, we can squeeze these in. One is rec center damage. The second is wild and scenic river study signage. And the last is a extension request from the listers for the grand list. Are there any other items to be added or changes to be made to the agenda?
Can I add something to?
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
I wanted to add addressing the possibility of a fence at the Creamery Bridge turnaround because of the litter and like the dumping ground that it becomes there.
Okay, cool. We'll add that to the new business. Awesome. Any other changes to be made to the agenda? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the minutes. So the minutes of April 6th. So is there a motion to approve the minutes of April 6th?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Make a motion to approve.
Okay, I think that was a second from Suzanne. So now, is there any discussion?
Second.
One addition that has to be made. Anita should be added as a visitor. So that's a friendly amendment. Are there any other changes or edits to be made to the minutes or any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, then we'll call the question. All those in favor of approving the minutes as amended, signify by saying aye or raise your hand. Aye.
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 I have to abstain.
Oh, good point, because you weren't there. So we're going to do a roll call vote because any vote that's not unanimous needs to be a roll call vote. So all those in favor of approving the minutes of April 6th, Jacob?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Leanne?
Abstain.
And Charlie? Aye. So the minutes are approved. Thank you. Public Works. First up are roads and bridges. Any grant updates, Mike?
Nothing at this time.
Okay.
No, with V-Trans, everybody being sent home, really nothing going on.
Okay, awesome. Fixed radar speed signs. Did you have a chance to talk to Lafayette at all?
Yes, I have. I just spoke with them on Friday. They just wanted a more better time frame when it's going to be done.
You mean like a more concise time frame?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me check with V-Trans and just make sure there's no issues with our permit. Because I don't want to schedule them and then have Richard Blackmore say, "Hey, there's a problem. You guys can't do this."
Right.
So,
no, we're on their radar. I spoke to the installer. In fact, the installer was in town last Friday.
okay. Awesome. So I will.
I mean, they're aware of it. As soon as we have a date, we can get locked in.
All right. Cool. Then I will just clarify that there's no issues with the permit. Then we can expedite it, maybe even do it earlier than expected. So good. Okay, next up on the agenda is the paving estimates. So we have 3 estimates that have come in for paving. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen and bring these up. So hopefully this works. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, so the first estimate we have is from Pike Industries. This is it that you're looking at. This estimate comes in at 172,000 plus or minus. And you can see the notes down here at the bottom regarding materials, pricing, dates, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to keep scrolling. I can come back to this if anyone wants to see more details. But so Pike was 172, 419.
Do we know anything about
Hutchins?
these refined engine oil bottoms that we should reference for the competitive bids?
I beg your pardon, Jacob?
Number one under the notes is they're highlighting the lack of REOBs, which is a new terminology for me. I didn't know if that's something we should be kind of referencing in the competitive bidding.
I have no idea. Michael, do
know?
you know what that's about?
Actually, I don't, and I'm using my phone right now, so everything's too small for me to read.
Okay. That need better?
I just a minute. I just brought it up.
Do you know what that means, Lori?
Well, it says you can go to that website to
Refined
find
engine
out.
oil bottoms.
Yeah, I'm going to do a little quick Google searching on the fly here.
Refine. I'm not 100% sure. I'm assuming that's meaning they're not using any waste oil or reprocessed oil to make their mix.
Yeah.
It's my guess.
That's what it
Yeah,
sounds like.
Okay.
Should be confirmed.
And
Yeah.
it looks
The
like-
internet is saying it's. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, it just looks like it's actually not. It's banned in some states. Do we know if it's banned in Vermont?
Well, they're saying theirs is free of that.
Yeah.
They're not using it, so
Yeah.
I'll bet you the states are listed under that website.
Sounds like it's a binder, and it's looking like it degrades quality. It's been used since the 80s. And
Okay.
it's used motor oil.
Okay. All right. Well, we can note that, and if we need
Yeah.
to
Interesting.
clarify with folks, we can clarify. But so
Sure.
again, Pike is here at 172. Hutchins came in at 157.5. Here are some notes on Hutchins.
Notice that the overlay in the shim is thinner.
Yeah.
Say it again?
yes, it is.
Looking at this.
Yep. That
Your
was supposed to be
your
inch and a half.
previous quote was 1.5 inches by an 1.5 inches. This is 1.25 inches, 1.25 inches.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was supposed to be inch and a half for everybody.
Now, a real quick question, Michael. That's over present pavement.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is not totally grinding and replanting.
Okay.
All right, so that's Hutchins at 157 with note that the thickness is not correct to specs. Lastly, we have Gray's, which is coming in at 169.037.
Can't do that.
Would anybody like me to scroll up to any section that we reviewed?
1.5 inch.
These are both 1.5 inch overlays and
Yes,
depths.
Yep.
If I can't tell by the tonnage what was on your first quote, but this would appear probably your best buy right here.
Yeah, let me do a quick some math. 1900 plus 520. Yeah, so Pike is about 110 tons more than Gray's.
Mm-hmm. And what's the price difference?
I'm looking to see the material. There's no materials cost. Oh, here we go. 68.15 per ton. 68.15 from Pike, and Gray's cost is 69.85.
Hmm.
So Very, very, very close.
Peanuts.
And it looks like Grace is just estimating less material consumption. That
That's what it
seems to be
looks
the
like,
biggest
yep.
difference. Yeah.
So again, Gray's is 169, Pike is 172. So there's about a $3,000 difference between the two estimates or the two bids.
So the little like 3-minute Google search here on the REOBs from an ASCE library is saying that several transportation agencies noticed that pavements constructed with the REOB modified asphalt binders accumulated more distresses than pavements constructed with REOB free asphalt binders. As a precaution, some state agencies have enforced different regulatory measures. It's basically a distressing issue and the sort of chemical and structural integrity of the binder. I don't know that like this is necessarily enough to be making a decision on, but if like everything else is fair and equal, the fact that Pike is disclosing what sounds to me like a higher quality product is encouraging, but I don't know if this is enough information to like make a firm decision based on. But that's kind of how I'm interpreting their bid.
Yeah, yep. And again, they're looking at a greater amount of material too, as far as the pricing goes. I mean,
Right.
per unit is more or less the same between the two companies.
Right.
Did you get any references from Grace?
I have not. No reference with it. I've never actually heard of the company before.
They've been around for a while. I've done business with them on several situations, but it was always parking lot and driveway type things or
Yeah.
Right, still there?
roadway type things, and they were very good.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
However, it wasn't roadway situation, so like
Yeah.
that's why I would suggest you go get a few references on them if that's the route you're going to go.
Yeah.
I mean, the other option would be to go with Pike, but have a caveat in the contract essentially, or a caveat that says that will be billed for materials used, not for estimate.
That was going to be one of my questions. Are the accuracy of the estimating on either side? Yeah, would this be a not to exceed or a fixed bid? And if really this, I mean, really seems like the biggest distinction is just their estimating strategy around materials. And so
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it should be that they would be coming up pretty comparable. If not for that, I wouldn't want to penalize Pike because they're estimating a bit more conservatively, as long as we're not going to be paying extra for that in competition.
Yeah. Yep.
Under the bullet notes, it says price is valid through 2020. Does that mean anything?
Probably either meaning through the end of 2020 or it's a boilerplate thing that haven't changed yet.
That's probably through the 2020 construction season.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just an estimate?
So this is a bid for the job, but as Jacob was just alluding to, this could be either a fixed cost or a not to exceed cost. So if we went with Pike, we could clarify in accepting this that it is a not to exceed cost, and it will be billed based on materials used.
Just for curiosity, Charlie, how did Hutchins' unit price per ton compare? I mean, I know they quoted less material.
The unit price for Hutchins is $75 a ton, which is a couple bucks higher than Pike and the other one.
6
Okay.
or 7.
Yeah.
Okay.
So not a ton.
So-
But
Didn't quote the right, they only quoted 1 1/4.
yeah.
Oh, right, I understand that, but I didn't know if that was just misunderstanding somewheres. But if their unit price is the highest,
Yeah.
that's still going to make them the highest overall if you add the difference in.
Yeah.
in the
That's a good
thickness.
So it sounds like it's between Pike and Grays, and it sounds like based on the discussion that Pike seems to offer a few more assurances. So I guess what I would offer is replying to Pike with a provisional acceptance pending, you know, clarification that this is a not to exceed price and will be billed based on units used, not on what's here.
Yeah, that sounds okay.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I support that.
Suzanne, that sound okay?
Yep.
All right. Well, then I guess with
So
that,
it's a condition that the estimate is not to exceed.
hold on one sec. I'm going to exit screen share. And so Suzanne, I think your connection's a little slow, so it's hard to hear, but I'm going to write the motion in the chat bar. So this is the motion that I'll offer. All right, so the motion, which is now up in the chat bar, is to provisionally accept the bid from Pike Industries pending clarification that this is a not to exceed price and we will be billed based on material used. So is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a second from Leanne. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing no further discussion, we will vote on the motion. Again, it's in the chat bar if you want to read it, but it's to accept the bid from Pike Industries pending clarification that it is not to exceed price and will be billed on materials used. So with no further discussion, we'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Sounds like everybody. Looks like everybody. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, motion carries. So I'll reach out to Pike tomorrow and clarify that. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, just for a little information, I did ask for different pavers, and the fourth one declined, saying the project was too large for them.
Too large. Okay, good to know. All right, so we're going to move on to buildings and grounds. Under buildings and grounds, the two things here. The first one, the 98 Main Street building. This is the old town office and the post office. So we've heard absolutely nothing from the United States Postal Service since the last meeting. So we can just table this until the next time.
Okay.
So just to be totally clear, no action, we're done. Just proceed as per, you know, normal
Yeah.
operations until we hear otherwise from them.
Yeah, the ball's in their court now. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, we've done everything we can to lead that camel to water, or whatever the analogy is.
I like that one.
I did reach back out to Laz though and just said, hey, look, we've done everything we can and they're not biting, so do not hold off on any work on the interior of that structure. You know, move forward as you would anyway. So
Yeah.
if they come back in 3 months and say they want to look at the alternative location, they're going to be up creek.
Yeah,
So
that's fair.
Or they're going to spend a lot of our tax money getting it the way they want.
well, maybe, or they could be bankrupt by then. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine this is the biggest fish they have in their pan right now.
No, I don't think it is either. I'm not surprised we haven't heard anything, but I'm done. I'm done expending energy on that front for now.
Agreed.
Next up is generator repairs. So we had Brookfield Service come up to do a generator service back on the 8th of April. During that service, they noted that the generator at the water plant had some serious issues with it, including what they say is the need to replace the control panel. The control panel costs $10,000 on that generator.
Wow.
So I went back through the invoices for service for the generators just to double check that they haven't alluded to this in the past or nothing crazy is going on with it. And I found no service about the control panel in the past. I thought they'd replaced it before, but I think I was wrong. So I think the next step here is that we were going to reach out to South Fork Milton, which is another vendor that supplies and services these. We can get a different estimate and see what they say. And then if that doesn't come through, we're looking at either replacing the panel or replacing the generator completely. Because again, $10,000. I mean, the full quote to fix everything on this was $10,800. So,
Ouch.
yeah, it's not a small piece of change. So, just want to make everybody aware of that's out there, and we'll try to get more information for the next meeting on that.
Charlie, do you
Yeah.
have any information what the control panel is? Is that the transfer switch or something actually on the generator itself?
I think it's actually something on the generator itself because what he sent us was, whoops. Sorry, he had a narrative with this that explained. Huh. I can't locate it now, but there was a narrative that they included in one of these things that basically it's the panel itself. Like the buttons aren't working.
Okay. I was just curious what they were terming their control panel.
Yeah, they basically said they could not get it to work. If I can find the notes from the site visit, I'll forward them along to everybody so you can read them. But that was their diagnostic of it.
Did they give a reason for or a diagnosis of why it may have happened?
That was gonna be my question.
Yeah, I don't believe so. But again, I don't have. I thought I had their narrative essentially right here, but I don't see it.
I'm worried about grounding, power surge, that type of thing. I may have done it. Would you agree with that, Jacob?
Yeah, I mean, to an expense of that, to a failure of that degree without any like prior indication of anything, I'd be certainly curious as to what mitigating circumstances would lead to that. So we don't just repair a really expensive thing in the same conditions that caused potentially premature failure. I wasn't quite sure. So does it sound like it was like premature, or is this like within the expected lifespan of that device?
I don't know. It sounded like based on what they wrote, and again, I apologize that I can't find it.
No.
My recollection in reading what they wrote was that it sounded like it was something that surprised them, but it wasn't like holy shit, what happened?
Right.
I will add I will add that we did on our end skip a year. We did not service these last year. They were serviced in 2018, and they were serviced in spring of 20. But December of 2018, I'm sorry, August of 2018 was the last time they were all serviced. So.
Okay.
So yeah, so I'll reach out to South Fork Milton, see if they have any suggestions. I will also ask them for a quote on service. I've heard that they're cheaper, but I don't know. So,
Well, it's worth getting a second opinion on a diagnosis like that.
yeah.
It's also worth trying to diagnose why it happened in case we got to do some sort of other corrective action.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so with that, we'll pause and we'll shift to visitors because it is 7 p.m. And we go in the order of folks coming. So Darren, anything for visitors?
Nope, nothing at all.
Okay. Larry or Anita, anything for visitors?
No.
You were supposed to write a letter to whoever concerning class 3 and 4 roads versus sugar makers. Did you do that?
Yeah, I do have a draft of that letter going, and I can pull it up. I needed to circle back and get some more information before I finalized it, just so I can try to, have it be as grounded as possible. But let me.
No, just do this. When you got it finalized, can you make sure that I'm copied, please, or get a copy?
Yeah, certainly. If you want, what I can do is I don't. It's not a long letter. I'll just pull it up right now, and you guys can see what it is that I've got. All right, that's the letter right now. Give folks a chance to. People see that okay?
Yeah, sort of. It's pretty fine here. I'm not on a PC. I'm on my tablet. So
Is that better?
yeah, thank you. Yeah, when you finalize this, would you just send me an email with it attached or something?
Yep.
If you could do that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, well, hopefully what I can do is try to finalize it and then we can approve it at the next meeting.
Yeah. Whatever, whenever the approved copy, I'd like to have a copy of it, please.
Charlie, I don't know if you want to add this at this point, but one of the issues that we're also having with these trucks is them racing down the village in the center at very high rates of speed. Not all of them, but a significant number of them too. So I don't know if that's worth adding, but if it is, certainly.
Okay. I'll make a note. All right.
So just a question. I mean, I think it's great. Respectful, clear, good language. So the ask is just to consider the impact. Like, is there more of a specific ask or corrective action or anything along those lines?
Yeah, so that at the end is kind of where I stopped writing, but I think the idea that was discussed at one of our last meetings was the ability for a town to either hold a bond for many of these guys or do the same thing as like a permit.
Right.
So the idea would be to have some sort of a permit or a bond where the town would have some recourse where if the road was, incredibly damaged from an activity like that, we would have some sort of a recourse.
Yeah.
There was some talk through legislators about requiring sugar makers that were commercial versus agriculture to carry all sorts of liability insurances. One to include damage by vehicles.
Okay. I will add that.
You can Google that up.
So that's a conversation that already happened at the legislature?
Yeah, I found it online.
All right.
By Googling it.
Great. All right. Well, I will finish this up and circulate it for comments, and then we'll get it in. All right. Awesome.
The other thing I had, Charlie, was has there been any movement on our town website updates and improvements?
Yeah, no movement on the site itself, but I've got a list of stuff going with Zach as far as updates go. So hopefully by the end of this week, we'll have all the major content things updated so that it's at least it's accurate as far as who's on what board and that kind of stuff. Some of the bigger structural changes might take longer, but that is moving.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sue, anything for visitors?
Nope.
All right, great. We will keep moving then. So the next item on the agenda is the annual financial plan. That is something that Mark was gonna draft or have ready to discuss tonight. So if there's no other objections or thoughts, we'll just table that. And then with the TAP, the next item D, the Transportation Alternatives Program. So there's no update there other than the town. We did go with Dubois King. They've been notified, and the process is now starting with them. So I expect to hear something back in the next week or two as far as next steps go.
Charlie, you cut out. You went with who?
Dubois King or
Oh, yeah,
Dubois
okay.
King, depending on your pronunciation.
Du Bois.
That's selected for the firm, and so they've been notified, and so things are moving forward there. And then item E, so FEMA. We did have a good call this morning with the FEMA team and the state team. Michael was on the call with me. We went through all of the damage inventory, essentially what got damaged and what needs to be repaired and how much it's going to cost. So big thanks to Michael for getting those estimates together. That was definitely not a small chore. So thanks for taking the time to do that. And being as detailed as you were. So that's great to have that information. So they have our information. They're going to reformat some of it and get it back to us so we can finalize it. But we're at a position now essentially where we can start to actually apply for reimbursement, almost apply for reimbursement for things we've completed. And then we can start moving forward on other fixes as time allows and as the governor's orders allow. So things are moving forward on the FEMA front, which is positive. Michael, do you have anything to add to that as far as from this morning's call?
No, I was just very pleased with the meeting. It was a lot less technical than I anticipated.
Yep.
Thought it went quite smoothly.
Yeah. So all in all, positive. I mean, it's taken a lot longer, but we'll get money rolling back in soon. And and the repairs to Riverwalk were started today. So if anybody saw machines out there, they're moving right along on that front. So that's great.
That's fabulous.
Great.
Just to that end, is there any scope for community gardens within that, or are they just focusing on Riverwalk?
Not currently, but community gardens is included in the scope of FEMA.
Okay, great. I thought they were in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Great. Thanks for pushing that forward, y'all. I appreciate that.
And I don't think there was a question at one point about Riverwalk and the eligibility due to some FEMA buyouts, but we made that clear today, openly transparent. There was some FEMA buyouts there before, and because of how long ago it was, that shouldn't be an issue according to them. So we don't have any issues as far as we know with certain properties not qualifying because of past FEMA help, which is good. So
Great.
That's great news.
Great. Anything else on FEMA? Any other questions? If not, we'll move on to Water Commission issues. So this mutual aid and assistance agreement, I kind of wish that Mark had been here to comment on it, but essentially we were sent this Vermont Intrastate Mutual Aid and Assistance Agreement for water and wastewater utilities. It's essentially an agreement that just we enter into by way of providing mutual assistance to other systems, and they provide it to us. So if the water system goes down or the wastewater system goes down, we have mutual aid coming from elsewhere. By nature of just receiving this, it means that we've entered it into the past. So we have had an agreement like this. It's just that it's lapsed. So what we need to do tonight is just adopt the mutual aid agreement for water and wastewater utilities. I apologize, I didn't have a copy of this scanned and ready to put up on the screen share, but essentially it's a boilerplate agreement that we were already a party of. I think we signed it back on March 18th, 2008, and then expired March 23rd, 2020. So we need to decide if we want to re-enter into the agreement. I really don't see any issues with doing that. If anybody does want to table this, I can shoot out copies to folks to read in full if they want it.
I mean, I'm a big supporter of mutual aid actions, but is there any like tangible example of what that would actually look like? Is it, I mean, recharging water? Is it, you know, sharing chemical stores or, you know, staffing? Any tangible examples? I mean, I'm not going to turn it down. I'm mostly just curious, like, what does mutual aid look like for a water system in northern Vermont?
I believe it's similar to what you were just outlining as far as like the sharing of resources and personnel.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the event of an emergency, a member's authorized official may request mutual aid or assistance from a participating member. Requests orally or writing. And members of the agreement are not obligated to respond to a request, but essentially we're here to receive requests and respond as we're able.
Okay, so we're agreeing to request.
Yeah, I think it's basically,
yeah.
it reads to me like a network thing. Like everybody who signs on, you're all part of a phone tree, basically. So people know who to call for help.
Yeah. That's
So
great.
like
Thanks for
if you
clarifying.
can help, you do, and if you can't help, then it's no penalty to us.
No, no. It says specifically right here that there's no obligation.
Yeah. Okay.
However, there is an expectation.
Yeah, it's kind of like be a good neighbor, right? Yeah, we essentially we evaluate the request and we determine if we have the resources to respond or not. So
yeah, that makes sense.
So is there a motion to approve the Vermont Intrastate Mutual Aid and Assistance Agreement?
So moved.
We have a motion from Jacob. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Great, thank you, Leanne. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote then. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Suzanne, was that an aye? Hey, Suzanne.
Sorry.
That's cool.
Yes.
Good, okay, awesome. All right, great. So that's been approved and we will get that back to them shortly. Thank you. All right, moving on to old business. The first item here, just the COVID-19 updates. This is just a place to, you know, talk or discuss anything we need to. The only update from the town would be that the town office is going to, in the next week or two, begin to reopen in-person services, but by appointment only. So anybody coming in will have to make an appointment, and there'll be provisions around facial coverings and payment processes and things like that to ensure health and safety as best we can. Other than that, there's no other updates that I have on this in town. Does anybody have any other updates or things they want to share regarding this? Someone left a really nice basket of homemade masks that were individually wrapped at the post office today, which I thought was pretty nice. Cool, like a big basket full of Ziploc homemade masks that were just, I mean, it was like, that's the kind of stuff that's awesome to see. So go Montgomery.
That's amazing.
Awesome. If there's nothing else on that, we can keep on moving. The electric vehicle charging stations. Is there any update on that front?
No, just waiting for the purchase.
Okay, great. Then we will keep moving on. Okay, this next item, the wastewater and the streetscape projects. So this is kind of a big one. So we'll take a few minutes here at least to go through this. So I emailed out a copy of the 95% deliverable to everybody last week. if you haven't had a chance to read all of it, don't worry. It's a super, super long document. A lot of the document is similar from the 85% deliverable. The things that I would draw your attention to would be the end of it, where it talks about the cost estimates and the timeline and the list of recommendations. And I'm going to just try to open some stuff up right here so that we can screen share on this one as well. Okay, so again, the big takeaways from this one as opposed to the last ones kind of start on what would be PDF page 71 or on page 64 of the numbered pages. So what I'm going to do right now is bring up the screen share. Oops. Okay, I'm going to share my screen so that folks can see this as we walk through it. Okay, did everybody see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so getting into cost is one area that it's important that we kind of look at. So this table right here that we're looking at, the total water costs. So this number here, the 11.8 million. So I want to be clear, first of all, that these are total project costs. The number here, and the number for the streetscape project would be what it would cost regardless of any assistance funding, grants, loan forgiveness, anything like that. But this number shown here at the bottom of the table is the overall cost for construction of the system as described in the document.
Harvey?
Yes.
So I was unclear whether these costs are reflective of, because they gave the different options of design. So is this with the cost for the like highest best option, or?
Yeah, no, so if you go back through the document, the report itself lays out a number of alternatives.
Yeah.
So the wastewater system, it was like lagoon treatments or aerobic digesters or one centralized collection system or multiple collection systems. So if you go back through the document, these costs are referring to the preferred alternative, which was the alternative the committee chose based on the report.
Okay.
And that would be alternative, I don't have the number in front of me, but it's either 4 for the wastewater. Anyway, it's back up in the document. So there's a section on the preferred alternative.
Okay.
I can't remember what number is, but that's essentially going to be the conveyance, the grinder pump conveyance system to the 3 different collection points. So all of the preliminary engineering describing the system is earlier in the document. This is where it gets into the cost of that alternative. So again, this is the total wastewater is 11.8 million. There's more detail on O&M costs, which would be the annual operations and maintenance. This table here, 7.4, is important. So again, this is looking at the total cost, 11.8 million, the interest rate that we're looking at from USDA Rural Development, which right now is 1.87. I just want to note that I think we can get that down to 1.345. So we can even shave more off of that. The term, and then down here, this is the meat of this table, is these numbers right down here. The annual cost per user and monthly cost per user. Those costs right now are way, 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 way too high. The target here is to keep the cost of this system somewhere around like 1 trying 1.5% of mean household income in the community, which is $633. So we want an annual cost around $633. So I'm just flagging that because this is what we want to get low, and this is a target for USDA rural development, getting that user cost down to that 1.5% of mean household income. So the thing to think about when you look at these numbers are that what we're going to do is we're going to go, actually, let me back up. So this report was submitted to USDA Rural Development last week, along with a loan application for $11.8 million. Now, what that does is it basically says to USDA, we need this much money, and we want you to help us finance this. So USDA takes this, they look at it with the environmental reporting that we've done, the statistics for the community around income levels, all the things that play into what offer they're going to make us. And Montgomery is well situated in that we're a low income community, which is, not great on many fronts, but on this front, it works in our benefit. And we've also done an incredible amount of work documenting that this project solves an environmental, health, or sanitary issue. That specifically refers to, one is that we've got about 20-something systems that are in the town's wellhead protection area. We have documented at least 25 systems that would be on the system, 25 septic systems that are failing or have failed. We've interviewed about 37 people, and about 24 of them have reported failing or failed systems. And then we've got other supporting information around kind of the impacts to the swimming holes and environmental health around that. And so the idea is that we're making a case that this is solving a crucial environmental need in the community. And that is what gets us to the highest grant loan ratio. So what we're trying to shoot for here is for the USDA to come back and make us an offer that is 75% grant to loan ratio. So what they would come back and say is, we'll give you the 11.8 million and we'll forgive essentially 75% of it. The remaining 25% would be what the town would essentially be on the hook for, less any additional funding support we get from outside sources. So I just want to be clear that that's important, because when we go to bond with the community, we're going to have to go to bond for the full amount of the entire project, but the language is going to be written in a way which says, essentially, you give us the authority to borrow this money under the conditions that, and then we get into the specifics about essentially conditioned on USDA RD having a financing offer of X. It has to be worded right so that the voters give us the authority to borrow the money, but the voters also have the assurances that if we don't meet certain, requirements, we're not going to borrow the money. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yep.
Charlie, I have one question.
Yeah, Sue, go ahead.
Your number of users, 165.
Yep.
So that's just like on 118, 242, right?
Yeah.
Am I correct?
Yeah, 165 is the number of users on the water system.
Gotcha.
And that's what it's pegged to right now. Now, remember, the system's designed to accommodate more usage, so it's not capped at that, but that's the number of users we have right now. And we'd expect that to increase in the future.
And did I understand you earlier to say you were trying to see whether you could get an annual cost per user down to $600?
That's the goal, yep. And
Charlie, that sounds unrealistic.
Well, that would come from a few things, right? So look at that number up top, 11.8 million, right?
Yeah.
So if we actually, as a town, went to bond for 1.2 million
Yeah.
at a 1.375% rate, I can't do the math in my head, but that's how we get that user cost down. So the user cost is going to come down by, one, getting the greatest amount of grant funding associated with the project, two, getting that lower interest rate, which we can get if we prove there's a health and sanitary issue,
Right.
and then three, lastly, and this ties into a next step, but if we can also do some other engineering work that lowers costs of the overall project, that can get it down. What we had to do was,
What I'm saying is, I think you're too low. I
Well-
don't see how you could do $600 annual. To me, in my mind, I was thinking $1,200, $1,000 a year, you know.
yeah. So I should say that I'm not positive we can get it to be 600, but we want to get it down as much as we can. Again, the target that USDA uses is they want the user fees to be 1.5% of mean household income, which in Montgomery is about $630.
Right.
So that's our goal, is to get that as low as possible.
And Charlie, I'm going to send you a separate email because I think I know of 3 other properties that have either semi-failing or have failed.
Perfect. The more documentation we have, the
I'll
more
send it by
support we
email
can
to
get.
you.
Yep. Because this preliminary engineering report right here was submitted with our application. We have until mid-July to submit additional supporting documentation. So that kind of information we can still continue to submit. Larry, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did, Charlie. Thank you. I go back to the nearly 90 situations where there is a problem, possible problem, and 20 some odd, 24, 27 failures. Those were all from the 165 determined users that are on the water system.
Yes. So what we did is we
So
interviewed.
those nearly 90 were out of that 165. Is that correct?
No, I'm sorry. So it wasn't 90 systems that had issues. So we have 165 on the system now, the water system that we're pegging this to. We conducted interviews with about 35 people, 34 people on the system. And of those interviews, about 26, I think, expressed that their systems were failing or failed. And that's documented by, in one case, there's a straight pipe going into the river. In another case, there's in other cases, there's seasonal ponding in the spring every year when the frost comes out of effluent where the leach field should be. There's sewage backing up into a residence at one place. There's a broken connection between a leach field and a septic mound. So what we did is we basically wrote a summary memo of the interviews, but we then redacted all the identifying information about the property. So we were able to submit that to the state to say, look, here's the documentation that there's health and environmental issues, but there's no way they can use that for enforcement because they don't have the actual address information.
Thank you.
Because one concern was that if we went to the state and said, hey, you know, Jimmy, John, and Jeff all have failed systems, the state comes back and says, fine, Jimmy, John, and Jeff, go fix your systems. So we've avoided that. So just real quick, I want to just scroll down. So 11.8 was the overall cost for the wastewater system. If we look at the streetscape project, total costs here are coming in around 6.9 million. Again, this is 6.9 being the overall cost, irrespective of any additional funding that we get through any grant sources or other sources. So these are kind of like our top end estimates of cost. So you're looking at like 18 point something million dollars for the entire project, wastewater and streetscapes combined. Now, at the end of the report, they also list a number of recommendations right here. So if you haven't read through these, take a look through them. A lot of them are pretty standard next steps. But that's kind of the meat of this document to sink into, are the cost estimates and the next step recommendations. So as far as next step recommendations go, a couple things happening here, and I'm going to pull up another spreadsheet right now and see if I can share this as well.
Another question.
Let's see. Whoops.
Charlie, when you're done, I just had one other question.
Yeah, you can go ahead, Sue. Ask away while I figure this
I'm just
out.
curious, on both of those, wastewater and on this one, streetscape, there was land acquisition. What is
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, so in order to make the wastewater system work, we're going to have to acquire certain areas for the storage and disposal fields, essentially large leach fields. So one of the next steps we're going to have to do is start to talk to these landowners about that and gauge interest, willingness to enter into a conversation about the purchase of these lands.
Right.
We're also going to have to do a lot of work on easements. That's less of a concern now. The land purchases are going to be the first one. That's one of the reasons why we haven't put this document online, is because there's maps in here that identify specific properties as being well suited or priority preferential for these sites. And we want to talk to these owners before these maps basically get put out there, so that we can help people understand what it is that's being discussed. So that is one of the big next steps, is approaching the landowners identified in the report to start the discussion about the potential easement or purchase of lands to support the project. I'm going to bring up something else real quick right now to help frame this. So can everybody see this okay? So this spreadsheet is an attempt at laying out a timeline for the project. And I apologize, it's kind of small text. Can folks see that okay?
Yep.
So basically right now, we've gone through these steps here. The preliminary engineering report's done. These two applications for funding to USDA have been submitted. As far as the engineer's work goes, the next potential opportunity is to start some preliminary design tasks in May that bring us through the summer, and we'll touch on that in a second. Down here, CWSRF, that's the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. So that's basically a state loan fund for projects like this. We've applied to the State Clean Water SRF Fund for money to support the final engineering for the project. Their priority list gets put up May 1st with a public hearing in June. So we find out about whether or not we got funding through the Clean Water SRF fund, basically, May or June. Timing wise, we're going to have a bond vote in late June or early July on this. The bond vote we need to have prior to this date, the response date from USDA in August, because USDA is not going to make us an offer unless we can show to them that the town is willing to enter into this kind of indebtedness. Again, it's conditioned upon things like other funding sources, et cetera, but we need to have that bond vote prior to these guys finalizing their response to us. And then down here, the NBRC is the Northern Borders Regional Commission. That's the group that offers up to $1 million for economic development projects. Deadline for that funding is May 15th. So these are some kind of things to keep in mind.
How much for the time?
Timeline-wise. and I can send this out to everybody so you have a copy of it. But this is what to keep in mind. Now, as far as final engineering and
Does the town
construction
gonna be
goes,
eligible for?
I didn't hear that.
so final engineering would take us through the fall of 2021 with construction starting spring of 2022. So just to kind of big picture frame it for folks, that's what we're looking at. You know, we wouldn't be having earth moved until the spring of 2022 at this point.
That says 2023. Charlie, that says
Oh,
2023.
sorry. It's in the 2022. There you go.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, good catch. So again, as far as next step goes, we need to hear from the Clean Water SRF Fund about funding the next steps of engineering. We have to hold a bond vote in late June or early July. This application needs to get in May. And then we have this preliminary design task thing up here that we need to think about doing. Now, the preliminary design task work, I'm going to pull up another document now, so give me a sec. Okay, so what I've discussed with Hoyle Tanner is essentially that there's certain things that we can do now to help boost our standing to get more funding, a better rate, a better percentage of grant to loan ratio. That's more of the documentation around the health and safety concerns or health environmental concerns. We can also start to do some preliminary engineering work, which can help actually take the design that the costs are based on and scale it back. These are things like in the engineering report, it says, hey, we might need 200 linear feet of pipe to connect X to Y. But if we can get some preliminary work done that says, hey, it's actually 100 feet of pipe, we can start to kind of chip away at some of the costs. And over time, they'll add up to real money. So what Hoyle Tanner has done is they've drafted an amendment to the original agreement that we entered into them for the preliminary engineering work. I'm going to share that right now. Assuming I can open it. All right. Oops. Oops. Let me try to share that one more time. Huh. Oh, here we go. All right. Can folks see this? Can folks,
Yep.
can you see a document?
Yes.
So what they've drafted for us is essentially an addendum to our initial agreement that says they're going to do these additional services to help keep the ball rolling on this. And again, better position us for the next phase of work. So what they're going to help us with is right here in the summary. Item 1 is essentially helping us chase down more money. These 4 things listed here are 4 other opportunities to get funding for this project. The first one is the Northern Borders Commission, which we talked about. That's that up to $1 million for economic development projects. They can also help us revise the SRF loan to make us better positioned for that with better terms. And then there's also the VEDA and CDBG grants that also can help bring in funding for this work. Their assistance in drafting this stuff, I think, is going to be pretty crucial just because these are time-consuming things to draft, and they have more experience in doing it. So as far as time, quality, and product, I think we'll be better positioned with their assistance. So one of the things they're looking at is essentially helping us get other funding. 2 is continuing to work with us. This is 2 is here. Continue working with us to perform the significant environmental and health problem documentation that we discussed. They're also going to be doing additional site engineering work. And then this is another one, this is kind of the big one here. So item 4, what we've talked about doing is going over both the center and the village with a drone and doing it as soon as we can before leaves come out, because that way they can photograph the center and the village at scale and use that to do some of the engineering work that they couldn't based on all the remote maps and photos they had. So when they were designing the system, they were doing it based on maps and photos that were basically saying, look, we think from here to here is this much distance, right? And this gets back to that whole, like, how much pipe do we need? So if they can fly the center and the village, get the photos, they can then actually do much more fine-grained measurements and use that to fine-tune the engineering and hopefully drive costs down. So that's a big part of this. And then the last ones are also some just engineering options about taking the preferred alternative and trying to make it more efficient. So again, there's variants that could use one big grinder pump for multiple properties instead of smaller grinder pumps, individual properties, essentially things that we can do to get these costs down. So this scope of work, which I can email out to, which I think did I email this out to folks?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So you have a copy of it.
Yep.
So that's the idea behind this. The funky thing with it is that timing is a little weird here, because the idea would be to execute this as soon as possible to keep the work moving forward. If we wait, we're going to lose time, first of all. We're also going to lose some of the conditions. Like right now, there's no leaves on the trees. In a month or two, there's going to be leaves on the trees. Some of the flight work they won't be able to do, things like that. So the cost of this is about $50,000. That would be something that, so just to recap, we're going to pay for the next stage of engineering work with that loan from the Clean Water Revolving Fund. That we're not going to find out about until June, right? So if we want to move forward now, we need to sign this agreement and figure out the $50,000 worth of funding of how we're going to do that. So that brings us to, how do we pay for it? So give me one sec. I'm going to close out of this. Okay. So if you remember, up till now, we've paid for the engineering work from 2 sources. One is a USDA Rural Development Search Grant, which was $30,000 free and clear to us for this planning. We also got a planning advance of $182,000 from the Agency of Natural Resources. Now the planning advance, remember, it's $82,000 that if we don't move forward with the project, we're not on the hook for it. If we do move forward, it gets rolled into our final loan agreement that would basically be our long-term indebtedness. Everybody clear on that? Okay, so our opportunity that we have now is to go back to the state's ANR, EPA, the engineering planning advance, and ask them to bump that up by $50,000. I did check with, we had a conference call with them last week. There's money available in their fund to do that right now. I think that's still the case. So we can submit an application to basically amend our initial one to add this money to it to cover this next phase of engineering work prior to finding out if the state's Clean Water Revolving Fund is going to give us all the money for the final engineering. Does that make sense to folks? I realize a lot of this is like a fire hose of information like flying at you, so I apologize for that. Does anybody have any questions or clarifications at this point that they want to make or ask? Okay, so that
I was just going to say, I wanted to give other folks a chance to jump in there. So I just want to clarify, this all sounds actually quite familiar from what we discussed at the last meeting, and it sounded like we were just waiting on Hoyle Tanner's additional services memo so that we could quantify that and be able to proceed with seeing about an extension or an increase on the grant/loan.
Yep.
Am I missing anything, or is that still where we're at? Now we have the memo. Now it's time to
Yeah,
get.
that's it. That's basically
Okay.
it. So our big decision now is, do we keep the ball rolling on the engineering work so that we can try to, keep things moving, but also work to reduce some of the costs that we're looking at, or up our standing for the grant loan ratios, interest rates, things like that.
Yep.
So if we want to do that, the choice we have, the option we have, is to file the amendment to the EPA agreement to cover the cost of this, and then, assuming we get that, enter into the agreement with Hoyle Tanner. I'm hesitant to enter into the agreement with Hoyle Tanner without assurance from the Agency of Natural Resources that they'd accept our bump. So I do need to clarify what the timeline for getting that back would be.
Right.
But I'm just going to put it out there. I think that one of the things would be is if we vote to adopt the amendment from Hoyle Tanner, it should be conditioned upon EPA funding.
Yeah. And I was going to ask, if you had any sense on what that turnaround is, and I mean, if you've already been meeting with them, this has been on the table, they've indicated they have funds, it's an existing approved grant that we're working under, like, will they be able to approve that before the leaves come out?
I hope so. I mean, I've been on conference calls once or twice a week. And so they've made it clear that, one, this is a project I want to support, which is great. I mean, they're all really strongly behind this. And two is, yes, they made it clear that the money is there, and we can ask for it now, and I think it would come rather quickly. So so I think that's kind of like the dump on the wastewater and streetscapes project at this point.
Charlie, I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Suzanne.
So you talked about, for the wastewater, the 75% ratio grant to loan. What about grants for the streetscaping work?
Yeah, so if you look at the 95% report, in that last portion that has the cost tables and the recommendations, there's a list of other grant sources or funding sources to go after. And some of those are listed in the addendum to Hoyle Tanner's agreement. So that's like the Northern Borders Regional Commission, the Economic Development Grant. Some of these could cover both. So yeah, so there's probably about like a list of 10 other sources that we're looking at to get money to drive those costs down. Unfortunately, USDA doesn't, for the community facilities grant, they don't do a loan to grant ratio thing where they essentially give you a loan, but X of it is grant once you've spent the loan. So for the facilities, it's a straight up loan. So it's on us to go out and ratchet that cost down now, between now and when we finally accept their offer. The one thing I will just throw out here too, we talked about it, but we will have to go to bond for a vote. Timing right now, I think we're looking at end of June, early July. So what I'd like to do is, for the next meeting, is have that bond language ready. So I'll work on that so that we can approve that at the next meeting, or at least have it ready for review at the next meeting, so we can keep the ball rolling on that front. Because basically what we're going to have to do is, it's almost the end of April. If we have a bond vote at the end of June, we're going to have to use the month of May and June to beat the pavement and rally support and do all that. So The sooner we have kind of our ducks in a row for that, the better.
So that bond vote could include 7 million for the streetscape.
Yeah, so the bond vote's gonna have to include the funding for the streetscape, for the wastewater. It's probably gonna be divided up into 2 articles because of the way it has to be written for USDA. And again, there's the conditions in there about accepting funding based on other things. Again, it gets back to this idea that the town has to authorize us to borrow 18 million, but on the condition that we would never do that. And it has to be written in a way that makes sense legally. So that's where the lawyer gets involved and USDA helps us out.
Got it.
And I will also just, as one more layer on this amazing cake, we also, and we'll get to this, the tax due date question has to be addressed too. So that's going to piggyback on this bond vote special meeting thing. We'll talk about that in a second though.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks, Larry. So tonight, essentially what we need to do is to decide, do we want to continue working with Hoyle Tanner at this point? And do we want to apply to the A&R EPA, apply for an amendment to our EPA loan for the money to cover it? That is the question at hand.
I've got a couple of questions,
Yep.
if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
And some are like content specific to the report, and then some are a bit more procedural, and I'll try to be pretty quick. So just to be totally clear, that 11.8 million, is that inclusive or exclusive of the streetscaping portion of this?
So it's exclusive.
Okay.
And we've tried to do it in a way where there's no duplicative costs, because this is going to happen like at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And so, so the costs are broken out.
Yeah.
In a way to try to separate them, but acknowledging
Yeah.
that like going to be action overlap.
Okay, cool. I do have some follow-up questions around that, but I just want to make sure I knew what we were talking about with the 11.8. And then there was a number of different, just like 2 clarifying questions around some of the content in the study. I actually carved out a fair amount of time and read almost the entire thing, which, man, that was thorough. We got our money's worth in terms of number of words and graphs or maps. I guess the 2 things that I just want to make sure I'm clear in my head, it was incredibly well written, actually. I've read a lot of engineering reports that are seem to be designed to confuse, and I was impressed with how accessible that was. The windshield study they were talking about doing, that's what we're discussing right now in terms of this $50,000 extension, right? The further study for cost reduction and kind of door knocking and more granular engineering assessment on a per property basis. Just to be clear that recommendation in the report is what we're talking about right now.
Yes, essentially the same thing. The verbiage in the report and the verbiage in the amendment might be slightly different, but that is what we're talking about.
Okay, that was my question. Seeing that the language is slightly different, but okay, cool. And then the third was, and I think this is just me like reading the same like cut and paste statements too many times, but I saw multiple references that there wasn't a good distribution treatment area identified in the village, but then there was mapped in the final alternative was that location kind of off of North Hill, and I kind of went back a couple times to figure out where the squaring of those 2 conclusions was. I thought one was in reference to an alternative that wasn't suggested, but I didn't actually land with a clarity of how those 2 pieces were squared for the village. Can you just help me understand?
So without having the document open in front of me, I'm not sure, but essentially what they did is they went through the alternative process to identify and then rule in or out an area. So it might be reading as in, we've identified 1 through 5, 1 through 4 aren't good, 5 is good. So again, I'm not sure without seeing the exact thing in the report, but that's
Okay.
essentially what they were doing is, yeah.
Yeah, and I can, rather than like calling up subsection 8.43, I'll double back through again and just make
If
sure.
you have specifics, dig them out and email them, and I can get
Yeah, I'll follow
all
up with you
that.
by email, just make sure. I'm sure there was just like one hidden paragraph in there that resolves it, but it
Yep.
sounded like, yeah, anyways, okay. I'm not going to get hung up on that right now. So then I guess a few sort of more procedural pieces. Let me stay in questions before comments. So knowing that the 1.8 is just looking at wastewater, and also knowing that there is an additional chunk for streetscaping that is not only like an ask on top of, but is actually going to be kind of baked in part and parcel to the overall execution of the project. And knowing that we're going to have to interface with multiple different funding sources for these different projects. It sounds like y'all have already, we've already been considering this and are trying to align the scoping accordingly with all of this in mind. Sort of like single phase, multi-component project, which is, complex. What are you, I mean, I guess some of the it seems like there's potentially some complications or challenges around streetscape funding. What I'm kind of hearing, in that this is all leading, both in terms of price tag and time frame and like biggest funding pot, it's all kind of leading with the wastewater, and the streetscaping seems like it's kind of overlaying or being sort of associated with this main drive in the wastewater, which I think makes sense. Do you anticipate like there's anything around the funding for streetscaping that we like need to be considering? Like I tend to kind of go to the big picture and then winnow down on more like the funding and sort of those administrative structures. And then I have a whole other series of questions around like the bond and taxpayer impact and kind of sort of public communications around all of that. What I don't want to do is be in any kind of bait and switch where we're like, oh yeah, so now that we bonded for the wastewater, here's an extra blah for streetscaping that has to roll along with it. So can you put that in context for me?
So, I mean, generally, I think what you're saying is spot on, that you've got these two projects which are separate, but are also overlapped, and so I think that we need to be really clear about, what is going to cost what and how it, adds up. As far as the outside sources of funding, I'm pretty optimistic that we can get these costs down considerably. I mean, we only talked about 4 different opportunities, but there's federal money, there's other state money through VTrans. So just because USDA isn't as well positioned for helping us with the wastewater project, there's other sources of funds that we can look to tap into. So I think that we need to essentially frame it as driving very, very hard to get as much outside funding as we can, and then be very explicit about conditioning all of our language, especially the bond language, on only advancing the project if some mark is met with funding. Did that get to what you were asking, Jacob, or?
It does in general. I guess I'm still like, and maybe I'm just going to kind of like, I don't want to bury the lead. I'll just sort of get to the comment part of it. I think what I'm still like a little tripped up on is, I guess I should be a little more like direct, like, because I'm still a little tripped up on the sort of the process of communication of this to the community. We're formally bonding just for the 11.8 for wastewater, and how streetscaping kind of gets woven into that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just want to be clear. We're going to bond for both.
Okay. That's super helpful to hear. Okay.
Yeah. They're going to be considered separately in the language.
Yes.
So like there might be one article for wastewater, one article for streetscape, but we will go to bond for both of those projects. Yes.
Okay. So in table 7 point whatever, I don't have it immediately in front of me. that was just referencing the bond value for the wastewater piece. That
No,
11.8. Oh, that 11.8 is combined.
No.
No.
So the tables are individual projects.
Yes.
And
Okay.
remember that the amount that they're showing there is the full amount of the project.
Yeah.
If that was to be bonded for. So,
Yeah.
so yes.
Okay.
Separate tables, separate projects, but just remember that like we would never ask the taxpayers to go into debt for $18 million.
Right. Totally. Yeah. Of course.
But
that
Kyle,
part
if
was
you're-
clear. I just trying to get like
Yeah.
crystal clear about sort of the structure
but it
and
would
the
be-
values that we're presenting. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be two separate articles. But your broader point, I think, is what's really important is that in the next few weeks, we need to be really clear and work on getting material together. How do we present this? You know, how do we roll this out? How do we tell the story? How do we get people to buy into it? And doing it in a way that's incredibly clear, you know, as concise as it can be, because that's going to be the big lift.
Yeah, and if I could just add one more thought to that, and then I'll shut up for a second. So for me, this entire conversation has like roots all the way back into the town office conversation. Like there's like a direct lineage or a direct narrative for me that goes back to that experience. And that same, I remember there's a very similar, I wasn't on the select board, at least for I don't think I was in select board for any of the bond votes, but I was part of I was with Larry on the community kind of committee around it. And I remember that the last time it failed was under that very same condition of, you know, this is the full amount. We have to go, you know, we have to get bonded for this full value, but under the condition that only this lower value will be supported. And I think there was so much, there really was just so much baggage on the issue by that point that I think anything other than a price tag of 0 wasn't really, it wasn't going to win. The political weight against that at that point was where it was just so far behind. And so the source of this kind of ask of the community, I just think like it could not be more clear to me that it's not actually generated from the select board's interest. It's really coming from the community, coming out of the VCRD community Montgomery Thrives process, which like I headed into that with sort of like a tacit expectation that like the building infrastructure was going to be emerging from that, and it didn't. That wasn't one of the highlights, and the community like rallied around this. And so all of that to say, I feel like it's going to be really just crucial to have that part of the story be reflected back to the town, is it not being a select board driven thing. And I'm wondering if this would be a good opportunity for us to re-engage with VCRD, because they offer their continuing services to the town as part of that program. Say, yo, we're at this point now, like what can you do to help us communicate to the town so that it's not being presented as the next big expensive infrastructure like investment that the select board is trying to like ram down the throats of the taxpayer. Honestly, I feel like, just on a very personal level, I feel supportive, but like trepidatiously supportive, because that is just a huge price tag. And I am really sensitive to the rapidly changing nature of the economy globally in this region, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, as a small business owner, I'm feeling all of my like risk aversion flags, like more triggered on the regular as I've got crews sitting at home and being paid. And so, you know, that for me makes me all the more want to see the support around the messaging from this not be like a select board driven initiative, but something that we can draw on VCRD or other community members, or the task force that was put to the working group on this be kind of driving the communications on that. Those are my thoughts around it.
I totally agree with everything. Yeah. I have been keeping in touch with Paul, and so I can reach back out and just kind of give him an update and say, hey, what resources can we offer? We've also been in contact with some other communities that have done similar things of different scales. So we've got some material that we can look at and kind of pull from and look at formatting and language and all that to kind of see how did other towns do this. And then, yeah, we have the committees that we can re-engage to help with the, beating the pavement and that kind of stuff, certainly.
Right.
But yeah, your main point is extremely well taken, that it's going to be critical how we tell this story, how the information comes across, and getting support behind it.
One quick question, Charlie.
Yeah, Larry, go ahead.
The basically $7 million for the streetscape, was that estimated at a project of its own?
Yes. Yep. The streetscape.
So since a considerable amount of excavation has to take place, et cetera, for the sewer project, would that $7 million not be reduced to do the streetscape?
No, I asked him the same thing, and with the plan that's in there, as far as the work to be done, that's the number, and there's no duplicativeness, duplicity,
Got it.
double counting.
Doubling up.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll have a beer for you. Anyways, I understand. Okay. Okay, I wanted to make sure of that because that's going to be an important question that's going to be asked.
Yeah, it was one of the first ones I asked was what we were counting.
Yeah.
I do want to add as a point of information, because Jacob brought up the old bond votes. I will just add briefly that there was a court case in which the court ruled that the intent of the legislature was to allow for 2 consecutive bond votes at 2 consecutive town meetings. And therefore, that last bond vote that we had, that a lot of folks were saying was illegal, was not illegal.
We understand that. We understood that before it happened.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But back to the issue at hand. Any other questions, comments, discussion? Leanne and Suzanne, do you guys have any questions? Or I realize this is also a ton of information, so no?
Not right now. The way I'm thinking of it though, and thinking back to our initial meetings with the development committee when they first came here, there was a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of excitement surrounding it. And I do think that we can revitalize that feeling, because it's been a while now and people haven't really heard much since those booklets went out. What was that, like a year ago or 6 months ago, something like that. But I do think that getting the same people, involved with, hey, look, so this is what it is. This is the plan now. This is as far as we've gone. And I think it would be a great idea to have him come back here and maybe be part of our, talk it up a little bit thing. Yeah. And I do think that it's a good idea, but I know for a fact that many of the downtown businesses would absolutely welcome the wastewater, and many residents as well. So I don't think it's going to be as horrifying as maybe some people might think.
I love that sentiment.
Yeah.
I will totally admit to feeling a little bit scarred from previous town debates. So I'm so happy for some more optimism and enthusiasm. It's great.
Yeah. So then just to circle back to the things that the board needs to act upon tonight, the 2 things that we have on the table, one is the application to the, sorry, brain fart. The first one is the addendum or the amendment to the engineering planning advance. This is the addendum that will provide us the additional $50,000 to fund the work. So we'll need to act on whether or not to submit the addendum to owner engineer agreement. And the other one is the addendum from Hoyle Tanner, which is the amendment to our agreement with them. So those are the 2 things that we need to act on.
What's the first one, Charlie?
Yep. Is there a question?
I got the.
sorry.
I got the motion for, never mind. Maybe you can just type it out.
Yeah, so here, so let me type it out.
Okay, thank you. I have the Hoyle Tanner one already.
Oops, sorry. Pulled up the wrong thing. Sorry, I think I have two of the planning. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so let's see.
Here, let me look at it.
All right.
Okay.
So that would be the EPA agreement adoption. So I guess there, I just made the motion. So I will make a motion to adopt the amendment to the owner engineer agreement with DEC, the engineering planning advance for an additional, oh wait, I
You must
think I
have
left
mentioned-
a figure off of that. That should say 49996. 49996.
A little bit of a difference.
Yeah. Okay, so is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Great, we have a second from Leanne. Is there any further discussion? If not, we can vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Great, any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, I will file that with them tomorrow. So the second one was the agreement with Hoyle Tanner. So this is the amendment to our agreement with Hoyle Tanner to support the preliminary design work as outlined in the amount of 49,996.
No.
So again, if we move to adopt this, we can move to adopt it pending receipt of the EPA money, or we can wait and submit the EPA money and get clarity on exactly what the turnaround time for that's going to be, and then adopt this at a future meeting, which might have to be a special meeting because if we pull them back for 2 weeks, that's going to be a lot of time.
Yeah, I would feel totally comfortable adopting this pending USDA receipt so that you can just move on it the same day that we get that confirmation. And if we haven't received it in 2 weeks, then we'll probably have a different conversation.
Okay, great.
I'd feel comfortable with that.
Hang on, Charlie. These amendments are for the same amount?
Yeah, so basically Hoyle Tanner pegged their amount to the amount of the EPA loan.
Okay.
Yeah. It's basically $50,000 is what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Yep. So then I guess the motion on the floor would be to accept the amendment to the Hoyle Tanner agreement to support the preliminary design tasks pending receipt of the response from DEC on the EPA advance. Was there a second, or was that a second from Jacob, or?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, great. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, I think that was, someone broke up there for 1 second. So just for clarity, let me do that again. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, great. Motion carries. Thank you. All right.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, Sue, go for it.
On the wastewater, do you have any estimates on what it will cost for like me to hook up onto the wastewater system? Are there any estimates from anybody?
So we have estimates baked into it. One of the clarifying things that I need to figure out with them is, are there any costs in that would be borne by the homeowner? Right now, all the costs in the report, I think, would be basically at no cost to the homeowner. I just want to make sure that there are no additional ones, like, do you have to have your existing leach field removed, and what would that, so I will get more clarity on that, Sue.
Yeah, I just assumed there would be a cost for me to hook up to the.
Yeah, I think all the costs for hooking up are baked into that report and that estimate. I'm just not sure if there's any additional costs on the homeowner side of it that we haven't discussed that might be required, such as dealing with an old system or something like that. But the hookup costs are all in that report.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so it's 8:20, so we'll try to move quickly through the rest of this agenda. Item D, the 98 Main Street discussion. We've already talked about that. There's no news on that front. Item E, sale of the ambulance. That occurred yesterday. Saturday. It occurred Saturday. So we no longer have,
11.8 million.
what's that? Yeah, right. No, so we sold it for 5,000. We were asking 5,995, but we took 5,000. It was the best offer we've had for the time it's been there. So the ambulance is gone. Yay. That's done. Item F. This is the tax due date question. So we spoke about this briefly last time, and I just wanted to clarify something that we discussed to make sure that it was clear. So right now, tax bills are sent out in July, with the first due date usually the second Friday in August, and the second one the second Friday in November. One of the concerns that we had that was brought up last time was that typically folks file their homestead declaration with their taxes, April 15th. This year, tax deadlines have been extended till July 15th. So folks can file their taxes up to July 15th. The concern is that if folks file their homestead declaration with their taxes and they wait until July 15th, and we send tax bills out in early July, we won't know who has filed a homestead declaration. So we might end up sending out a bunch of tax bills that have to get revised. Does that make sense to everybody? So I think the solution here is that the state sends out a weekly update to this list. So if we can check that list in early July to see who has and hasn't filed and run a comparison report to last year's, we should know pretty clearly who in town should have filed that hasn't, and we can do some direct outreach on that. So I don't think that's going to be as big of an issue as we thought it was going to be.
That's good.
Makes sense for the
Is that
check
clear to
back
everybody?
homeowner.
So that's basically the recap on that discussion as far as the homestead declaration goes. That's not going to be as big of a concern as I thought it was going to be last time. So that still leaves us with establishing a third tax due date like we've talked about. So that would have to happen by an affirmative vote of the town at a special town meeting. Now, this gets kind of complicated because of how the town votes. So a bond vote has to be held by Australian ballot. So that's the system that towns have to use for a bond vote. Montgomery does not use Australian ballots for anything. We've never adopted any kind of an article that says we're going to vote on this or that by Australian ballot. That means that if we're going to change the tax due dates, it has to happen at a special town meeting from the floor. So Australian ballot for the bond vote, floor vote for the tax due date. So what we're going to have to try to work out is to have the special town meeting on the same day that we have the Australian ballot vote, so that folks can vote from the floor on the tax due date and then cast a ballot on the way out the door. So it's just a planning thing that we'll have to take into account. That's kind of the situation there. My hope is that at our next meeting, which is the first one in July, we'll have more clarity on bond language and the language around the tax due dates. And so, Anita, if you're still there, I'd like to catch up with you at some point later this week or next week and just run a few scenarios by you to talk about penalties and interest and things like that.
Okay.
So once we do that, we can come back with a more solid plan, I think, about the due dates. So that's it for the tax due dates for tonight. Next, real quick, under new business, the public Wi-Fi hotspot. So there's been a couple offers from a couple different organizations to install public hotspots in places to help with the need for increased internet accessibility, given all the stuff happening with homeschooling and remote learning and all that kind of stuff. So I've reached out to two of the organizations who do this, and they're both essentially slammed by the response they've heard. They're on their list. And so hopefully within the next however much time, they'll circle back and putting a pretty high speed boosted signal in the center, which could potentially give Wi-Fi coverage to the majority of Montgomery Center, which would be neat. So watch that space. We're on that list.
So just to clarify, yeah, I've been sort of listening to some of VTEL's public promotions and I saw the email come through. So we've responded, we're on the list. Now we're just waiting. There's no further action that's already in the pipeline.
Yeah, there was two groups that we responded to. One was actually like a Microsoft group out of McGill. No, it was a group that was out of McGill, but they were working in the States. So there's a couple of them that we responded to. So we'll see who gets back to us first and works with us. But yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And just, is there any, does Everett know about this? And I only ask because knowing that I know that the Datacom or the
broadband,
the working group
broadband committee,
yeah,
I haven't I just did this a couple days ago, so I'll reconnect with him and let him know that we're looking at it.
Cool, that's great. I mean, I know it's not like actionable for him. It just seems like a good
yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Charlie.
The next item on the list here under new business is the solid waste district permit renewal. Basically, this is the site at the town garage that we've been using. The permit's up. We don't have a better alternative at this time, so we've submitted the renewal. The public comment period got opened up for abutting landowners, and Sue Baker did submit comments that she does oppose the renewal for a number of very valid reasons. So that's all percolating right now. So that's just a point of information that our permit is now in review status for that site.
Yeah.
We did talk to Solid Waste District about putting in, I think I mentioned this, but fencing that's visually pleasing, that can help screen that property, visually limit trash blowing. So
yeah.
Added items. So real quick, rec center damage. As folks may or may not have heard, about a week ago, someone decided to do donuts in the field at the rec center at some time during the evening, tore it up a bit. Based on feedback from people who were around and witnessed certain things, we're pretty sure we know who did it. And I've tried to back channel with them for the last week to basically say, look, if you come forward and you apologize and you agree to work with us, this can end here. I thought we had a solution last week whereby the person was going to do that, but that seems to have died. So a police report has been filed with the Vermont State Police regarding the incident, just to cover our ass. In the report that was filed, it did reference the witness reports that we got, which put this vehicle in that field and this individual behind the vehicle. So that individual is named in the report. So that has now either has been made clear or is going to be made clear to that individual today that that report's been filed and they now have a target on their back, essentially. That report can be withdrawn if that individual comes forward and, you know, apologizes. I would be more than happy to call the Vermont State Police and tell them to withdraw that report and that we've resolved it internally. But that's the state of that situation.
Okay.
The wild and scenic signage. Basically, we got a letter from Lindsay Wright at the Wild and Scenic River Study Committee, MRBA, and what they'd like to do is put signage that they've bought on every place where a town road crosses a river that's named. So this is like Vincent's Bridge, a couple spots on the Trout River. Basically, if you've ever been anywhere else where you cross the bridge, there's a sign that says what the name of the river you're crossing is. That's what they want to put up. So what they need is permission from the town to erect these signs. So is there a motion to allow the installation of signage indicating the names of rivers along town roads?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, great. We have a motion from Leanne. Is there a second?
Second.
Whoever won that race can get it.
Let Suzanne have it.
I heard at least 1 second though, so. Awesome, great. So any further discussion on this? It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I'm assuming if they're installing that they'll like coordinate with Michael et al. Around setbacks and all that jazz. That's
That's part of the letter they sent was to coordinate with the road crew and everything. So
perfect.
Awesome.
That's great.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, motion carries. Next up, real quick, so this is the extension. Basically, every year, the Department of Taxes sends a letter out to the towns asking whether or not they want an extension to file the grand list. The listers have asked that we file this extension. They don't think they're going to need it, but they want to have it just in case. So again, this is just with the approval of the Select Board, the Board of Listers may request an extension of time to complete work relating to the duties of listers and or assessors. So is there a motion to approve the extension request for the 2020 grand list filing?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion from Jacob. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Great, we have a second from Leanne. Any further discussion?
Yeah, is there any like sort of practical upshot to that I'm not aware of?
So the practical upshot of the extension would be that we have more time legally to get it done. The downside is that we can't really establish a tax rate until the grand list is finalized.
Right.
We're not, so there's like upshot to having an extension because we're not on the hook to get it in if we're not done. The downside is that we can't do the tax rate. But again, the listers basically said they would request this just in case, but they don't think they're going to need it.
Okay. Just so I know what the negative ramification would be from, like, is there what would help me understand what the worst case scenario would be from a timeline standpoint if they did need an extension in terms of setting the tax basis on our calendar? Like, is there going to be a ripple, I guess is what I'm asking. Because I know they don't want to have to use it, but if they do, and we've just approved that, I should at least know what the ripple is.
The tax rate.
Yeah, the ramification would be that we can't set the tax rate and the tax bill is delayed.
The tax bills are delayed, correct.
Yeah.
Okay. And is that to a degree that's going to impact cash flow or anything? I mean, is this
Yeah, so
this is a level of inconvenience, correct?
well, it's inconvenience, but it does raise an issue where if they wait long enough and we can't send tax bills out until much later, we could have a cash flow issue because
Right.
when we send them out in July, we have the 2 tax due dates. The first one's optional, but we usually do get a big slug of money in on that
Yeah.
first due date.
Yeah.
If we send them out later, the first due date can't be until later, so it would mean later income. And Erin's aware of that, and so Erin's on this. She's on. I talked with her about this today, and she, understands the potential ramifications. But if we work towards avoiding that, I think we can.
Okay. And she's comfortable with the potential impact if that does happen.
Yeah, we just won't let it happen. Essentially, I mean,
Okay, great.
This extension would give them until like September 15th to file the grand list. No, we're not going to wait until then.
They've never
Well-
needed that. They've never needed that. That long.
That's totally. I mean, is it worth shortening that window if we know there's going to be significant negative ramification and they don't need it? Like, why?
So, we can file this with the state and internally give the listers a date. This
Sure.
basically just covers the listers so that if they are late, there's no ramifications from the state saying, "Hey, you didn't."
Totally.
You know what I mean?
And that part I'm totally satisfied with. Like, I'm happy to basically remove the state's penalty from the equation so we can deal with it internally. I guess I should have been more clear. I guess what I want to just poke at is is there some other deadline, impact, adjustment, control internally that we want to at least acknowledge and expose, if not actually through an amendment or future action, say, hey, actually, at this point, we run into a cash flow issue. We may not have enough sense of our cash flow to say that. I didn't want to pass a motion that could detrimentally affect our cash flow with the assumption that everything will be okay without actually knowing what the impact is.
Yeah, no, I think I hear you, Jacob. I think at this point we could pass this and then that be an internal thing we should keep track of.
Okay, I'm satisfied with that. I just looking for clarity more than anything else. That's fine with me. Okay, thank you.
All right, any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Any opposed? Abstentions? Great. Motion carries. Suzanne, you had an added item on here about the fencing at the Creamery Ridge.
I'll try to make it quick. Basically, just where that turnaround is on Creamery Bridge has, in the past couple of years, become a dumping ground for people's big house garbage bags. Not just their visiting for the day trash, but house trash. And I was wondering if down that embankment, and it's really hard to clean up, and it's basically just going into the river. I was wondering if there's any way that we could look into putting up some sort of barrier so that people can't just throw their bags of garbage down that embankment.
Yeah. Let's go look.
What year is this?
What's that?
What year is this?
Yeah.
Jesus.
I mean,
Let's go look at it. Let's go some afternoon this week. Let's take a walk because I need to see it to visualize what the terrain is like.
okay.
But yeah, I bet we could work something out to try to help make it better at least.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
It's a tough.
So this is on the east side of the bridge?
It's on the West Hill side of the bridge where the town plow turnaround is and the parking area.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's very steep there, and people the amount of garbage down there is pretty gross.
Yeah.
Mm.
All right. Yeah. Let's go take a look at it and see kind of functionally what might work.
Okay.
All right. Cool.
In addition, there's an individual from Northwest Solid Waste District that can check that stuff out for you. And if he can determine who's dumping the trash, have him clean it up.
Well, that's true. Yeah. That is part of their purview. All right. So with that, the only things left on the agenda are 2 liquor licenses and overweight truck permits. So for liquor licenses, first one up is a outdoor consumption class 1 and class 3 for the Black Lantern. Is there a motion to approve the outside consumption permit class 1 and class 3 license for the Black Lantern?
I'll make that motion.
Great. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'm trying to remember if I'm allowed to take action on this since Mary is technically an employee there. Although I guess technically right now she's unemployed. All right, so I'll second for that. Sure.
Okay.
Unless anyone sees a conflict of interest there, in which case I'm happy to recuse myself.
That's okay. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Sorry, that was an aye for. This is like
Approved.
approved. Okay. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And the next one we have is a outdoor consumption permit, class 1 and class 3 for the snowshoe.
I'll make that motion.
Great. So we have a motion to approve from Leanne. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Is there any further discussion? And then we can vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Great, motion carries. We do
Let's
have.
attach a little note thanking them for not having to call as a special meeting to approve. That's awesome.
Awesome. So thank you, everybody. We do have some overweight, fleet permits here, but I'm going to ask Mark to review these before we sign off on them. So we'll pause on that.
Charlie, do you have warrants that have to be signed?
Yeah, we do. So the last thing I want to talk about is getting things signed. So I will go to the office tomorrow and I will lay all this stuff out. Oh, shit. Hold on. Oh, no.
Uh-oh.
Sorry. My
Okay.
computer is so old. My computer is so old that if it unplugs itself, it dies because there's no battery. And the
Oh yeah, I know the game.
So
That's a fun game.
also I'm missing a few keys, so I can't type an O.
I can tell you everything about age.
What happens when you get unplugged, Larry?
I've been unplugged for years, Charlie.
All right. So yeah, so as far as signing things go, I will get stuff laid out at the office, and then I will just reach out to people directly in the next day or two and figure out a time to get things signed, if that works.
Okay.
That sound cool?
Charlie, is Michael still on?
No, Mike hopped off.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so with that, is there any other business to be conducted tonight?
Stay healthy.
Yeah, stay safe,
Yes.
everybody. So with that, a motion to adjourn is always in order. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion from Leanne. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Great, motion carries. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Good night.
Everybody.
Bless
Bye.
you.
Bye.